Hello and welcome back to the WARC Podcast. I'm Anna Hamill, Senior Editor at WARC. We're back with another episode from our Marketers Toolkit podcast series, where we dig into the biggest marketing and advertising trends defining 2026. The Marketers Toolkit is based on exclusive data from more than 1,000 real-life marketers around the world, one-to-one interviews with brand leaders, and analysis from WARC's in-house team of experts. Today we're talking about creators. New data from the IAB indicates that investment in the creator economy has increased 26% year on year, 4 times faster than growth in the wider ad spend market. And creator investment is expected to reach $37 billion in 2026. But while brands clearly see the opportunities in working with creators, demonstrating effectiveness in the area can still be challenging. And tackling that tension will be a major priority for marketers in 2026. Here to discuss this in more detail are Alex Brownsell, Head of Content for WARC Media, who wrote this trend, and joining him is Becky Owen, Chief Marketing Officer at creator marketing agency Billion Dollar Boy. But before we get into the discussion, a quick thank you to Criteo for sponsoring this episode. They help thousands of brands and retailers have more effective ads by reaching the right people in the right shopping moments using a mix of smart AI and real-world data that's hard to beat. You can try an interactive demo and learn more at criteo.com/walk. Alex, Becky, welcome to the WARC Podcast.
Thank you.
So the new IAB data shows that spending on creators more than doubled to $30 billion in the last 4 years alone. Becky, why do you think creator channels are now accelerating so quickly?
I think it's a mixture of a lot of different things. I think obviously where audience attention is, and the more that younger generations who are born on social put all their attention onto TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, there is a huge audience there. And that means that social is able to have more creator profiles, have long-term audiences. And so if you've got the eyeballs, you've got those creators that are able to build those profiles, then of course that's going to increase opportunity for ad spend. And we're seeing that different mediums are no longer holding the same potency that they used to have. So of course, ad spend is going to go where eyeballs is, where engagement is, where community is. And I think the final point on that as well is creator marketing has almost made us rethink what advertising is. It used to be just a foghorn of here's my message, thank you very much. And we've learned this whole kind of new way in which audiences actually want to be spoken to by brands. And it's just been proven year on year on year that we want different ways to engage with brands, different ways to hear messaging. So I think that's also a rewrite of what advertising actually is. And I think that also is making people put more and more money towards it.
And it's been a relatively quick transition, hasn't it? When you consider, broadcast TV, for example, still really popular, but those broadcast channels have been around for decades.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I've been in this space 13, 14 years. So for me, it doesn't feel like that. It's felt like it's been quite a slow ebb, mostly because I've been in the world of this, seeing how impactful it actually is and how much it does build brands. And so it's weird, I guess so in the context, it's fast, but for me it feels quite slow because I've had loads of conversations with people where they're like, no, it's not going to stick, it's not going to take hold. And then finally people are actually saying, oh, creator marketing is a thing. It's been $1 billion industry for a really long time.
Well, $30 billion industry.
$30 billion, I think it's quarter of a trillion soon. So it's been bringing in the money for a really long time. I just don't think people have taken it that seriously for whatever reason. So I would say from my perspective, it's been performing. It just hasn't been taken seriously with the big boys.
Really interesting. Alex, advertisers appear broadly confident that creator marketing works. So 52% of those surveyed for WARC's toolkit data believe that it is more effective than other media options. So they do feel confident in it. In your view, what do creators offer brands that other channels aren't at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, Becky's kind of already sort of said this, but I think reach is a really important factor in all of this. We are seeing a kind of ebbing of reach from, channels like linear TV with younger audiences in particular. So for those harder to reach audiences, I think creator marketing has become a really important way to kind of, talk to those consumer groups that they can't find elsewhere. I think more sort of philosophically, and this is the best way and I'll try not to butcher this as I repeat it, but I think we've kind of moved from maybe one to many in the sort of broadcast era to one-to-one, which was the sort of sense that digital marketing could allow every brand to kind of ultra-personalize and tailor and target, to this sort of decentralized many-to-many approach where the creators are acting on the brand's behalf. They are able to talk much more authentically with their audiences, with their communities, than a brand could potentially ever do. And I think the other thing, I mean, there's so much that we could discuss, but I think the other thing to sort of throw into this is the fact that the funnel seems to be collapsing, and that you can move from discovery through to conversion so quickly. And creators seem to be operating at that kind of sharp edge nowadays.
Becky, what do you think?
I love that model because I use that model all the time.
I probably stole it from you, to be honest.
You haven't stolen it from me. I stole it from someone else. So well, you should credit them one day.
There's a lot of good ideas in the creator space right now.
Yes, but I think what the many-to-many, it's the advocacy era. And it's people... So when influence was born, it was because people like me who earned my size paycheck were telling me what they spend their hard-won money on. And that is a really powerful thing. We've had celebrity endorsements for years, and sometimes I get a little annoyed when people muddy celebrities with influencers. But what makes influencer work is when they feels like that person has my life or has my pain point, and they're talking about a product they really do. And that's that many-to-many, the advocacy era. It is incredibly potent, and you can't recreate it with a billboard. So I think that's really what's making it work so well. We want to be told by people that we trust and recognize ourselves in about, if I'm going to spend my money on something, it really is going to help me. And that's this kind of many-to-many concept of all these micro, to some extent the mega ones, but they tend to become celebrities at that point.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff, Alex. It seems that obviously create a lot of money going into it, but consistently impactful work is still relatively elusive in the space based on the data that we saw in the toolkit. Why do you think that is?
I mean, the risk of generalizing or overgeneralizing, I think a lot of brands still see creators as a tactic rather than a strategy. It's something that they can do alongside their sort of BAU marketing work as a sort of extra kind of, cherry on the cake, if you like. We're not necessarily seeing the kind of integration and rigor in this part of advertising that we see in other parts of media, for instance. I mean, that is changing, but I think maybe up to the point of the last few years, that's been the problem. There's this acknowledgement that this is an important way now that you can deliver results, that you can kind of achieve your campaign goals, but not necessarily a kind of fully thought through, fully kind of effective approach to it.
Yeah, really interesting. So the vast majority of those surveyed by WARC said that they use basic engagement metrics when it comes to creative marketing, such as likes and shares, and then only a minority engage in things like brand lift studies or MMM marketing, which we talk about a lot on the podcast. What are you seeing with your clients, Becky? What's their approach to measurement?
So I think it is becoming a lot more rigorous. We're seeing that specifically in the US. And there is a pressure and a push to us, for example. And I say, like, we've got all the people coming to us that already want it, that say that it needs to be more accountable. And we are seeing brilliant people do economic measurement around it. We're seeing people saying that we've got to see if this actually shifts the needle with sales. We work with Portal, for example, in the US and the UK to see if our real-time creator work actually does sales whilst the campaign's running. So as creator sizes grow, which we're seeing significantly, we're getting increased pressure to be more accountable. And those are from the ones that are really investing heavily in that. So we are seeing a shift. I think some of the reasons why it hasn't connected as much is a lot of people see creator marketing as a product, not a skill. And this has always been my biggest bugbear. It is a skill and it is all strategy based. And another reason is creator marketing moves at the speed of technology. It is deeply entrenched with how platforms are building their products and engaging. And that is the race of technology. So I think that's why sometimes it feels like, just likes and engagement feels like a safe place because it's stabilized within the creator marketing ecosystem. Whereas actually, I always say I don't know how long I've been doing this job, 12, 14 years. Let's lie, 5, I'm young. But every year I do it, my job changes. And I think that creates this kind of confusion around, I just want to make it a product. The number of brands that say, what's the product? What's the fixed plan? So I can just have my Excel sheet report on it. So there's just constant pressure around this accountability piece. But I mean, listen, that was a waffly answer. I would say what we're seeing is increased pressure to be accountable. It's coming from the CFOs that are signing off multi-million-pound budgets, always on budgets now. And we have to keep up. The pressure's on us to keep up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So a study by Billion Dollar Boy, your agency, highlighted this measurement, what you're calling a disconnect with marketers briefing creators as a brand equity play, but assessing against those performance KPIs like we just mentioned. How do marketers find the balance with that?
So this is so interesting. And I think it's kind of what Alex was saying about the collapsing of the funnel. Like a creator post can do everything, which is a head scratcher, right? It can do the awareness, it can do the sales. If you get it right and you get that magic sauce, it does everything in one beautiful thing. And that's what we're all looking for as brands. We want the culture, we want to like take over, we want the memes. And so I think we plan for the brand piece, but we know it has to do the sales. And we kind of just have this expectation that if you get it right, it does everything. And I don't need to work that hard. And when we did this study, it was such a head scratcher to see they plan for brand, but they measure on sales. And to me, I think that's why. It's because it is such a unique model of working with their communities. It has collapsed the funnel. I think it's really collapsed in this space. And so then when we're planning, I just think we just layer in a ton of assumptions. But of course, the budget sizes have to be accountable. So that's this internal disconnect. And oftentimes it's from the other teams now. So you've got the creator teams that were left alone because it's like, creators, you do your nice little thing in the corner. We'll come back to you when we want you. Now they're dominating. And so internal teams are like, hold the phone. How big is this budget? We're building our whole brand in 2026 with creators. I need Excel level rigor. So I think it's causing this internal stress point that we are seeing increasingly, and we're trying to equip teams to navigate these internal pressures. Really complex answer.
Yeah, it's complex stuff. Alex, that's one of the things that you picked up on in the toolkit chapter about creators as well, was that these organizational challenges are inhibiting creator effectiveness because creators are kind of slipping between silos within the internal marketing organization.
Yeah, that seems to be what we've found with our own research is creators have either been born out of little standalone teams, or occasionally, actually, often they've come from PR. The marketing unit, which is obviously the bit that has the biggest budget, the paid media budget, is now sort of looking at this and thinking, well, actually, we need this, but don't necessarily know how to integrate it in with what they do with other channels. Where and we can talk about this more, but I think there is this assumption that you can productize creator marketing in a way that you can if you're buying billboards or TV spots or online display inventory. It isn't like that. It is different. It requires different skills. Creatively, it's a different challenge. And maybe we're just at the point now where we're seeing brands start to figure out, okay, we need to reorganize ourselves to get the best out of this and not just sort of throw money at it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because 80% of creator revenue, I think this is from the Billion Dollar Boy study as well, is driven through indirect impacts. And brands are likely to be missing part of the picture if they're not thinking about the indirect impacts as well, which are obviously much harder to measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of my favourite examples of that actually is we've just done an amazing campaign with Argos called Arg Haus. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
Love that campaign.
Love that
so
campaign.
Cool.
Christmas special is out. Who thought that you could do a Christmas special with Argos? And people literally saying my favourite episode is back. It was a series, a mockumentary, where we turned everyday products into an art gallery. And I actually interviewed the head of social, head of digital there. And I was like, how did you get this idea through? Like, how did someone say, yeah, let's Argos, mockumentary, makes perfect sense? And he said it's because time and time again, we've measured rigorously the impact of creator marketing. And so when I said we need to invest more and do something that really is brave, but we think it's going to work, it's because they have years and years of data proving how effective it is for Argos. So then internally, they were like, do you know what, we can bet on this? And he actually said it's the first time that we've put anything on social where people want more of us. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective because advertising, rarely do we say we want more. we're like, we'll tolerate this until we can get to the real stuff. And I just think it's very interesting that brands are starting to do better advertising, but only if they base it on this rigor of a legacy of measurement. So it is key now. This effectiveness is so key for us to keep going in this direction.
And what I think is really interesting about the Argos campaign, and for our international listeners, that's a shop where you would turn up to buy your air fryer, all of those type of...
Like a Walmart.
Yeah, exactly.
Buy.
What I loved about it was very kind of tongue-in-cheek humour, almost a sketch comedy.
Yes.
With the creators that were involved in it at an art gallery. So they would go up to the pedestal, which would normally have a statue on it, and have a Argos product on it. And that struck me just as so different to a lot of the creator marketing that we see. How did that idea come together?
So very brilliant woman called Claude, who's our associate creative director. I need to make sure I get it right. She said something that struck with me because I even think about this in my job. Like, she just was given space to think of an idea. And it was a very simple idea. Like, what if Argos was an art gallery? And it's kind of office meets, I don't know, art gallery, I suppose. She said it made sense because what really made sense about this is the product was centralized. So the products were on the pedestals. We look at a coffee machine as we would do a work of art and talk about its chrome finishings as if it's like the most sophisticated emotional commentary we've ever seen. So the products were centralized. Argos was able to be there, but there was entertainment and value like baked into the whole thing. And it seems totally off piece, but she said at every turn, we didn't have to force the sell. We didn't have to force the story. And then what really brought it to life was they cast creators that were really well known for sketch comedy. Like, the casting was perfect. Like, if you're entrenched in TikTok or Instagram culture, you will have known all of these creators for their brilliant use of comedy. And then they came and wrote the script with them. So I think the idea wasn't forced. It made sense. And then the mechanic in which they built it just honoured and respected social. So, I mean, I love it. If you haven't watched it, watch it because it will entertain you. Have you watched it, Alex?
I've seen a little, yeah. And it's good.
I think that might be a lie.
No, really, I have. I tried to keep up with advertising.
This episode of the WARC Marketers Toolkit is sponsored by Criteo. To learn more about their data-driven solutions, check out criteo.com/walk. In the toolkit, we cite analysis by Creative X, which confirms up to 45% of creator ad spend on Meta is wasted as a result of a failure to follow creative best practice. And only 27% of creator content tested by Kantar is strongly linked to the sponsoring brand. So what needs to change about how brands work with creators to ensure creative makes as big an impact as possible? And some of those lessons that you were just talking about seem really relevant to that.
So I read this and I felt this because I used to work at Meta, and that was my job for a while, to help people do best practice. I think it's because we are still one asset does everything kind of saying, like one asset can do everything. So would one asset do everything? And then we've got this whole narrative of boosting creators' assets, right? Just put paid media, extend your reach. Great, it does work. But I think the disconnect is you have to brief for organic and you have to brief for paid. And we did this amazing study with Stitch Fix with Meta actually in the US, where we started boosting creator content. And we were actually seeing like our CPMs were dropping, and it was all about getting people to do their first stitch, get their first box. And we were starting to see the results were really good, but kind of stagnant. And so what we decided to do there is we went back to Stitch Fix saying, hey, your paid media is really working with this creator first strategy. Can we advise you on something? Let's keep the organic piece going because it is doing something good. Can we brief the same creators though, but can we brief them for a paid first strategy? So every creator had 2 briefs in front of them. One, do your thing. We always say that. That rule's never going to go. Freedom from a type brief, lead into authentic story. But if you really need that paid media, because creator content does work so well, you have to brief them and ask for a separate asset so that you can do those best practices. I think when we get it wrong, we're mushing them together and annoying the creator and alienating audiences, or we're just boosting everything. And sometimes creator content will start with a story about their grandma. And if you're taking that paid asset out of the audience that knows that creator, they're just going to see someone talking about their grandma for ages, and they're not going to see the product-led messaging. So I think it's just, you've got to brief for where that asset's going to go, and don't be afraid to brief a creator twice.
Yeah, how much of this is also just about getting the basics right as well? So things like optimal content length and distinctiveness. We know the System 1 study into this, Alex, distinctiveness was a huge hugely important part of the creator effectiveness conversation.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because as a brand, you're stepping into somebody else's environment, into somebody else's space. So how you can show up in a way that doesn't, I suppose, feel incongruous, but also absolutely is identifiable, is using your distinctiveness, your distinctive assets. To me, it just makes sense. I mean, I think we sort of just about hopefully moved on from the sort of conversation of repurposing, TV assets for TikTok and this kind of nonsense. But I still think brands, or at least hopefully we have, but brands I think now need to kind of go beyond just thinking about vertical video, or actually how do I show up in this space, and using colours, logos, products, whatever it might be, is a really good way of doing that.
I think it's really interesting because one of the other podcasts we did as part of the Toolkit series was around kind of how consumers feel like there's just a fire hose of junk being fired at them on social media, and it's causing them to kind of look more into real life experiences. Yeah. And when there's so much money going into the creator economy, the stakes are just so high because, as you mentioned, attention is at a premium now.
Yeah, we are in this attention economy war. And it is, I mean, I've seen some really interesting individuals talk about what advertising is doing to social spaces, and it's squeezing audiences a little. But I think that's because, I'm going to go back to Arg Haus. That was advertising that people wanted more of.
Yeah.
So how are we choosing to show up in these social spaces so that it doesn't feel like a fire hose of narrative messages? Buy this, it's $5.99. But I mean, we're seeing this audiences going to slow spaces like Substack. We actually did an event with Substack last week, and it's incredible the earning potential and how Substack is empowering creators. And we're seeing a lot of brands trying to get their head around, we need to be on Substack, hopefully in the right way. But there is, we have to be careful as we keep pouring money into these places that were designed to meet our peers, our individuals, connect, feel a sense of humanity, even if you're not in the room with an individual. There is advertising brilliant basics, but there is still a need to honour, if we keep doing the fire hose, what happens to social? And that's what a lot of people are starting, very smart people are starting to talk about around the future of social.
WARC's Toolkit data also shows a clear regional split. So US marketers seem much more confident investing in the creator economy compared to marketers in the UK, for example, and other regions globally. So 72% of marketers in the US are investing more than $1 million a year into creator marketing compared to just 52% in the UK. Becky, I want to ask you, why do you think that is?
I think it's really interesting, and we've seen it in our own data. For me, I think it's because brands in the US, the sheer scale of audiences they have to reach via one language, one asset, they can reach a huge amount of their customer base via creator marketing. So it's a really safe bet. When we're working with brands in the UK, they have a small audience. So how much are they going to do for that one English speaking asset with that creator that is 50%, 60% of their audience is UK based? A lot of times they're having to think regionally. So how do we think about Germany, France, etc.? So it's more complex when you're planning in the UK. Your audience size is different. You can't just pour a load of money on one strategy and know that you're going to hit all your key reach goals. Whereas in the US, it's so expansive. You've got so many people that if you crack just the US, you're doing really well from a revenue perspective. It's a lot simpler to do that. So I would say, it's just basic scale. And a lot of brands that we speak to now, they know that if they want to crack the US and if they want to survive and continue to grow at the pace they want to grow, creative marketing is the way to do it. So we're seeing that data as well. And I just think it's just more nuanced to be able to do that in the UK. And I think you're still having to think very strategically about how you're going to hit all of your audiences, but then also how you're going to think about Europe. So then you've got to have people with different languages, different content styles, different sense of humour, which then kind of chops up those types of budgets.
Yeah, Alex, I want to jump into one of the tensions that you outline in your chapter. One of the big points that you make is there's potential clashes between control and authenticity in the creator space, and that maybe threatens to hinder marketers' pursuit of creator effectiveness. Can you explain that tension in a little bit more depth?
So, we've talked about the organisational challenges, particularly within marketers. But I think, if we look at when they're actually then committed to the creator spend, I think there is this perception that creator marketing is just another channel. It's just another slice of the marketing budget, the paid media budget, increasingly, and that isn't the way that the creator sees it necessarily. I mean, these are people. They're not. It's not inventory. They're not commoditized. I'll say that again. They're not commoditizable in quite the same way, or in fact in any way. So this is something that marketers are increasingly going to have to get their heads around as they use creator marketing more to reach their goals. Becomes an increasingly large part of budgets, but they're not going to have the same degree of control of data, of tools necessarily that they have to sort of manage other media channels and platforms like a sort of puppeteer. This is much more about sort of influence and working and collaboration with the creator. So it's a new skill, and I think we are seeing that tension. The smarter brands are the ones that are figuring out that they need to operate differently in this space than they do in just regular sort of online display, for instance. And I think we'll probably see more of that.
What's your view, Becky? I mean, you're working with clients directly on this stuff. Is this a tension that's coming up in your work?
Yeah, I think it's always been the tension that's here because, again, I might have said it earlier or I might come back and say this later. But it's a really complicated way to advertise. There's no singular way. And I think the best brands that are doing it, they're investing in it. Teams, skills, but they're also recognizing there's not one way to do it. So within like the creator marketing spectrum, you will have your mega creators that have a huge reach that can kind of get a lot of fame and frenzy. And then increasingly, I mean, I often say, what is a creator? Like, is your employee a creator? Is your community now a creator? Because if you get micro individuals talking about your brand, like you get like an incredible amount of groundswell around products, etc. So there is a massive tension. And I think it's only got stronger because of how dynamic the creator economy has become and how different creators are operating in these spaces and what you get from them. And I think that even changes what you should be asking of them and the model in which you choose to collaborate with them. How do you brief them? And, ambassador programs, for example, they are increasingly on the rise because they're critical. Small communities, teams that actually can nurture and foster those, they're critical, and authenticity really does live there. But if you want the big mega creators, if you're going to hire the sidemen, it's a totally different kind of ball game. So I think the tension's always been there. It's only increasing because the way in which you can activate creator marketing is like there's 10 different ways that you could do it as your brand, and probably all 10 are going to be brilliant for you.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is what you're saying around creators almost becoming celebrities. And, celebrities have long been used in advertising, but how you would engage with someone as a celebrity versus a creator, now those two things are starting to become merged.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the professionalization of the creator industry and those cross-media creator brand building, everyone's got a Substack now, everyone has a podcast now, or like all of a sudden creators aren't just on Instagram or on TikTok, they're across multiple channels putting their point of view out, and they are acting more like celebrities than they are perhaps micro creators. Has that taken away some of the authenticity that Alex is talking about, and how do you navigate that as a brand?
Yeah, it has, because the bigger they get, the more they have a team. The more that you've got a PR team, you've got a manager, you've got individuals that might be curating brand deals on your behalf because it's part of your growth strategy. So we all know that when we see someone like Amelia de Moldenberg take the US, that was a growth strategy by her team that planned that. This is a really interesting story that I heard from someone at Blanket Ventures, amazing company that invest in creator brands. She was working with Emma Watson after she came out of Harry Potter. They knew that they had to remove the kind of Harry Potter singular dimension from her. And so they curated and went after a deal with Burberry, because immediately she went from Hermione to Emma Watson, the woman. And this is what happens with celebrities. Mega creators, as they become celebrities, that there are people curating deals like that because they're thinking about, how do I take America? How do I shift into TV? Maybe I want to be a film star. And so as an audience, you're watching that. And there becomes a slight barrier now between the products that you're talking to me about. Is that real? Or is that strategic? And that's why I always say we have to remember what influencer marketing is about. It is about people who look like me, who feel like me, telling me the products that they generally genuinely use. And that is why influencer marketing is so potent. It is not just celebrity endorsements on steroids. It isn't. And so we do see this kind of transition period as creators become celebrities, that yes, they get reach and frenzy and chaos around them, but the potency of that messaging does dilute compared to those smaller individuals.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Do you think that now that so many creators are really leveling up in their audiences and kind of, I guess, more mainstream fame than just being internet famous? Internet famous feels like a very 2025 kind of term, but do you think they're at the risk of becoming, I don't know, some of the sea of sameness that really plagues other channels, where it feels like everything kind of looks the same, has this veneer of the same professionalism, the same teams working on the same content?
Yeah, I think we've kind of been circling the drain of that a little bit, because you get a lot of people that want to repeat other people's fame.
Right.
But this is the gift and the curse, I think, of creator marketing and social, is community's king. And so if we see the sea of sameness, community probably doesn't stick around. And then when you get new exciting voices coming with a distinct proposition, community goes there. And I think one of the hardest things about being a creator is the threat of new creators coming in, having a new point of view that suddenly grabs attention. So yes, there's this concept of sea of sameness, but I'm not entirely sure that it is sustainable, because it's all built on where community is and where eyeballs are, and we are fickle and we will go where we are interested. And I think that's what happened when we had like the Instagram aesthetic, but then TikTok came and then we all rushed to TikTok because it was different and distinct. So yes, maybe, but there's always someone new telling another story, and that audiences are flooding around.
Really interesting. So what type of creators are brands looking for now to maintain that, startup spirit and connection of the creator economy, especially as we mentioned, consumers feel much more wary about the fire hose of stuff coming at them on social media all the time?
My favorite way right now is out of category creators. So collaborations that feel off the wall and unique, but still make sense. So we see a lot of brands starting to look at, for example, if you're a fashion brand and you're a great fashion creator, there's probably a handful of creators that you're working with. And so then, yes, it's very good, but does it feel like maybe a conveyor belt of marketing with these creators? So we're seeing a lot of interest in who are really unique, unexpected creators that I partner with, that creates a new angle for my brand, potentially opens up a new niche audience that I didn't realize, and that isn't cluttered. And actually, I always say it's kind of like the Gucci times Supreme mashups of brand times creator. Like, we love that when you see like two things that feel opposing come together and find a common ground. It's distinctive, it feels rewarding. Oftentimes it's more entertaining as well, because we're not expecting it. So I think you always need the category ones. That's kind of your bread and butter. You shouldn't ignore those. But really, it's when brands are thinking like, who are these really unique voices that aren't predictable but have something that can really strengthen us and surprise our audience, and it's based off of entertainment, not just here's a product and here are the USPs.
So Alex, you cited a few brands in your chapter of the toolkit. Who do you think is doing this creator marketing especially well? You mentioned Unilever. They're putting a huge amount of money toward creator marketing in 2026. Can you tell us a little bit about their strategy?
Yeah, I can do. Well, in terms of who's doing it well, I'll leave that to Becky, because she knows, it has a much sort of closer ringside view of what's happening. But Unilever caught our eye at the start of the year. It was about March, April time, I think, when their CEO came out and said moving to a social first strategy, 20-fold increase in the number of influence that they want to work with. And for a huge advertiser that has always been a proponent of marketing best practice and effective advertising,
absolutely,
to come out and say that was a huge statement, and I think surprised quite a few people. We really wanted to sort of get under the story, so we invited them to speak on the Creative Impact stage at Cannes Lion this year in the summer, and it was fascinating to sort of actually hear how it was working in practice, that they were building up this. So our speaker, Africa van der Klasvost, worked in Unilever Foods specifically, and how they're building a foods influencer network. Vast increase, I think 800% or something increase in the number of influencers they're working with. And it comes down to all of the reasons that we've been talking about, that there is this sense that we need to, we sort of advertisers need to change the way they operate. And I think that 50% switch into social, by the way, that's massive, and puts Unilever in a position where it's going to be spending the vast amount of its advertising budget with a handful of big tech platforms, the Metas, the Alphabets, TikToks. It's an extraordinary moment, I think, and probably we'll look back as a real watershed in the industry, because it's such a break from what we've seen before.
And from one of the biggest advertisers in the world. Becky, what brands have you seen that are really impressing you in this space?
Well, to go back to my point about out of category, I think the one that has done it really well, and my favourite brands to actually partner with are luxe fashion brands, because for some reason they are very experimental. They have a long leash of what audiences will tolerate, and we've had a lot of great opportunities to work with quite a few. Loewe we've worked with. We did an amazingly fun campaign with them where we paired fashion creators with AI creators and kind of did this mashup of content that both honoured what fashionistas were doing and then new models of production. But when we're thinking about out of category, what I think anyone can admit, if they go on Loewe's TikTok, it doesn't look like a fashion brand, but it does look like the who's who of who's interesting on TikTok, and they do an amazing job of leaning into unique, quirky personalities that you would never say a fashion brand belongs here, but they belong here, and they're finding that common ground. And it really is social. Again, I'm going to quote our creative director, Claude. A lot of brands get scared of social because it's different for them, but what she said to me is audiences are used to this. And I think sometimes it's scary for us, so we think it's scary for the audiences. But our audiences are consuming this type of content all the time. And I think what Loewe have done really well is they've looked at, like, our audience are consuming this and they love it. How can we be around it? And how can we surprise everybody? And to me, that is a perfect example of someone that is leaning into social first world without ignoring themselves and really rewarding audiences with things that they're not expecting in their feeds, which then, you know, what you're saying about the fire hose, one of the things I'm always talking to brands about is the distinctiveness. How do you remain distinctive when we have a bit of a sea of sameness? When there is a fire hose, you still need your content to cut through. So fashion brands do an amazing job of that, high fashion. We've had a lot of fun with Loewe. We've had a lot of fun with Versace. Again, with some of these more innovative production techniques with creators. I think they're great case studies.
Really good stuff. That is all we have time for. This has been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Becky, for joining us on the WARC Podcast.
Thank you so much. Wonderful.
That's all we have time for. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the WARC Podcast. Our Marketers Toolkit podcast series is sponsored by Criteo, and the WARC Marketers Toolkit is now available to all subscribers on WARC.com. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like and follow the WARC Podcast, and for more on Criteo, check out criteo.com/WARC. Thanks for listening.